JC on. Baby. Honey, I need everybody to stop what they are doing right now, because what just went down between the game and Drake might be the most embarrassing public humiliation hip-hop has witnessed in the last 10 years, and I am not being dramatic, I am being generous. The game finally got his Drake feature after 2 whole years of writing, defending, campaigning, and waving the flag harder than anybody on the actual payroll, and what Drake handed him in return has the entire industry clutching their pearls and reaching for the smelling salts. We are talking about a feature so small, so lazy, so breathtakingly disrespectful that the streets are officially calling it the most expensive 2 words in rap history. And the part that set the internet completely on fire? Drake did not even post the album. Not a story. Not a link. Not a caption. Not one single emoji. 4 days. It took a full public intervention on a live stream, in front of hundreds of thousands of viewers, before the biggest artist on the planet would lift one manicured finger for the man who has been out here risking absolutely everything for him. And baby, when I tell you the fallout from this is still unfolding as we speak, I mean insiders are texting, group chats are melting, and half the West Coast is sitting back with popcorn watching a man learn the hardest lesson of his entire career in real time. The group chats are in shambles, the timelines are at war, and y'all already know I am here for every single drop of this tea. Before we get started, make sure y'all hit that like button, share this video on every platform you've got, and let somebody know what we are doing today, because this is not just a story about an album rollout gone wrong. This is a story about loyalty, about debt, about favors given and favors never returned, and about what happens when you hand somebody your whole heart and they hand you back 2 words and a smoke emoji. Stay locked in, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand why some of the most powerful names in the industry are quietly whispering that the game just learned the hardest lesson of his 20-year career, and why Drake might have just lost the last real soldier he had left standing. So first of all, let's set the table. The game just released his brand new album, The Documentary 3, the 3rd chapter of the franchise that made him a superstar, and this project was supposed to be his victory lap. 20+ years in the game, pun fully intended, a West Coast legacy act with one of the most celebrated debuts in rap history, and this album was his statement to the world that he is still that guy. But honey, from the moment the tracklist hit the internet, this rollout has been nothing but smoke, chaos, and controversy, and at the center of all of it sits one man. Aubrey Graham. Drake. Now, for a bit of context, because some of y'all have clearly been living under a rock, we are still standing in the fallout of the biggest rap war of the modern era, Drake versus Kendrick Lamar, and every rapper in America has had to pick a side whether they wanted to or not. And the game did not just pick a side. He picked a side, bought property on that side, built a house, and started landscaping the yard. On this album alone, he put out the record No Breaks with Drake. He slipped Drake's name into bar after bar with double meanings and wordplay, he nodded at the GNX situation, and he went out of his way to let the world know that when it comes to the boogeyman himself, Kendrick Lamar, there is peace, but it is the kind of peace you announce loudly into a microphone so everybody in the room knows exactly where you stand. And where he stands, baby, is OVO territory. Straight up. But here is where it gets messy, because while the game was out here pledging allegiance, his own backyard was quietly falling apart. Word on the street is that AZ Chick pulled her feature clean off the album, and now there are rumblings that Lefty Gunplay has followed right behind her and done the exact same thing. Allegedly, these artists did not feel any real smoke until they actually heard the album, and once they heard what this man was really saying and who he was really aligning with, they wanted no parts of it. That is not a rollout, that is a retreat. And then came the album release party, and y'all, this is where the whole thing went from messy to genuinely uncomfortable, because the game got on that microphone and went on a long, raw, rambling rant about not being able to get Kendrick Lamar on the phone. Not being able to get Black Sam, Nipsey Hussle's own brother, on the phone. Standing in a room full of people gathered to celebrate his album, and this man is venting about phone calls that never get answered, about things he did in the early days of Kendrick's career and Nipsey's career that he feels have been forgotten, overlooked, and unappreciated. Imagine that. Your own release party, your own big night, and the headline coming out of it is that the West Coast is not picking up your calls. Baby, that is not a celebration, that is a cry for help with a DJ in the background. And I need y'all to really sit with that image, because it is the key to this entire story. The game is a man standing in the middle of 2 burning bridges. On one side, Kendrick Lamar and the entire new West Coast will not pick up the phone. On the other side, the man he torched those bridges for would not even press share. Which brings us to the record that started this whole fire, the one they are calling No Breaks. Now, when the track list dropped and people saw that little word featuring next to Drake's name, the internet lost its collective mind. A Drake feature in 2026 is still the closest thing rap has to a cheat code. Radio stations will spin a record just off the strength of his name in the credits. Blogs will cover it. Playlists will place it. The game knew this, the label knew this, everybody with a functioning brain knew this. And then people pressed play. And y'all, there is no verse. There is no 16. There is barely even a sentence. Drake says the title of the song, No Breaks, over and over and over again, 8 times on the hook, and that is the entire contribution. That is the feature. The biggest artist alive pulled up to the most important album of the game's last decade and essentially autographed the mailbox instead of co-signing the house. Let me paint this picture for y'all, because I do not think people fully understand how wild this is. Imagine you ask a world-famous chef to cook at your wedding. You tell everybody for 2 years that this chef loves you, that y'all are family, that the menu is going to be legendary. The big day comes, the guests are seated, the doors swing open, and the chef walks out, hands you a packet of ketchup, and leaves through the back. No entree. No dessert. Just condiments and a wave. That is what this feature is. The game asked for a meal and Drake sent him dipping sauce. And the crazy part? The game still had to smile about it, because even the sauce has that name on it, and that name still moves units. 2 words, y'all. 2. Somebody did the math in the comments and I absolutely screamed, because if you break down what a Drake feature is reportedly worth on the open market, and you divide it by the number of actual words he said on this record, each individual word might be worth more than some artists' entire recording budget. He did not give a verse, he gave a collectible. A verbal NFT. Something you frame on the wall and stare at. And the game has to pretend it is a full-course meal, because the alternative is admitting publicly that the Emperor of the Six sent him out to war wearing a paper uniform. And let's talk about why this hits so hard, because some people watching this do not understand what a Drake feature actually means in this business. This is not just a verse. This is economics. When that little, featuring Drake, tag appears in your credits, radio programmers who would never normally touch your record suddenly give it a spin. Playlist editors who would scroll right past your name stop scrolling. Blogs that have ignored you for 5 years suddenly develop opinions. The game has been in this industry for over 2 decades. He knows exactly what that tag is worth. He did not need Drake's 16 bars. He needed Drake's name, Drake's cosign, and Drake's machine. That is the real currency. And that is exactly why what happened next feels like such a violation, because Drake knew it too. He knew that his name on that tracklist was doing all the heavy lifting, and he still could not be bothered to give the album one real verse, or even one real post. And do not let anybody rewrite history about what the game did to earn that favor, because the receipts on his loyalty are long and they are documented. For the last 2 years, through the entire Drake and Kendrick war, this man was out here campaigning like he was drawing a salary. When the whole industry was counting Drake out, the game was in interviews defending him. When the internet was doing victory laps on Drake's name, the game was on his platforms waving the flag. He put his own relationships in jeopardy, relationships that go back decades, relationships with people who actually helped build the West Coast from the dirt up, all to stand 10 toes down for a man in Toronto. Nearly every public move he has made for 2 years has shown his allegiance, his alliance, his so-called loyalty to that camp. He did everything but get the owl tattoo. And in return, he got 8 repetitions of the album title and a disappearing act. Baby, if loyalty were money, the game would be filing for bankruptcy right now, and Drake would be the bank that closed his account without sending a letter. And here is where the story goes from funny to genuinely shady, because after that 2-word masterpiece hit the world, Drake went completely silent. And I do not mean quiet. I mean ghost. The album drops, the blogs are posting, the fans are debating, the game is doing his media runs, and Drake, the man whose voice is literally on the project, whose name is literally in the credits, acts like the album does not exist. Days go by. Not a post. Not a story. Not a repost of somebody else's post. Nothing. Now, I need y'all to understand something. This is the same Drake who has built an entire second career out of calling people out for not showing support. This is the same man who once used his own album Time to air out Rihanna for not posting ASAP Rocky's project. He keeps receipts on who posts what. He notices. He has always noticed. So for him to sit on his hands while his most loyal foot soldier is out here fighting for his life on the charts? Baby, the hypocrisy was so loud you could hear it from Toronto to Compton. Let's walk the timeline, because the timeline is where the disrespect really lives. The album drops on day 1, and the rollout is everywhere. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, nothing. Day 4, the blogs start noticing. By day 5, the narrative has completely shifted from the music to the silence, and now the story is not, the game has a new album, the story is, Drake is ignoring the game's new album. Do you understand how brutal that is? He did not just fail to help, his silence became the headline. His inaction actively damaged the rollout. At that point, posting nothing was louder than posting anything. And the streets noticed immediately. People started circulating the receipts, and honey, they pulled up an old skit from the game's previous album, Drillmatic, where Drake left him a voicemail explaining why he could not make the album. And the excuses on that voicemail, y'all, I cannot make this up. He was busy. He was traveling. He was in Italy. He was in Russia. He was shopping for sneakers in Nova Scotia. He was on the PlayStation with his son. He was slaving away for the touring company. Brother, I love you, but I just cannot do it this time. The internet resurrected that voicemail like it was evidence at a trial, because suddenly everybody realized this is not a moment, it is a pattern. This is what Drake does when a favor comes due. He ducks off somewhere fabulous, leaves a sweet little voice note, and lets the problem go to voicemail. Enter the plot twist nobody on this planet saw coming. DJ Akademiks. Yes, that Akademiks, the streamer, the blogger, the man who has carried more water for Drake over the years than the Niagara Falls. The one person in media who has defended Drake through every scandal, every beef, every lawsuit, every public loss. That man got on his live stream, in front of his entire audience, and publicly called Drake out by name. And y'all, when I tell you my jaw was on the floor. Because Akademiks did not hint. He did not subliminal. He looked directly into that camera and said, this is a slight call out, and Drake, I love you, but you have to show some love to the game's album. He said the game has stood by Drake when so many people turned on him. He said the album is out this week, throw it up on your story one time. One time. He said, you have a song on there, you have to acknowledge the people who rock with you. He literally said, we live in a time where you have to appreciate loyalty. A grown man, on a live stream, pleading with the biggest artist in the world to post an Instagram story for his most loyal supporter. I have never seen anything like it in my life. And Akademiks was not even being disrespectful about it, which somehow made it 1,000 times worse. He was practically apologizing to the OVO fans in advance, saying they were going to be mad at him, but he did not care, because somebody had to say it. He pointed out what everybody in the culture was already thinking, that the game has put his own relationships in jeopardy for Drake, that he has been out on the West Coast waving the OVO flag like nobody else on earth, and that loyalty like that has to be repaid. And then he said the part that really stung. He said he was going off history, watching how a lot of people eventually turn on Drake, and that the game is one of the few solid ones left. Read between those lines, y'all. Even Drake's most loyal public defender is out here admitting, on camera, in front of everybody, that the circle is shrinking, that people keep turning, and that the loyalty well is running dry. When your last line of defense starts sounding like a marriage counselor, baby, the relationship is in trouble. And guess what, y'all? It worked. Within hours of that stream going viral, and I mean hours, in the wee hours of the morning when he clearly thought nobody was watching, Champagne Papi himself finally emerged from the shadows and posted the record. But baby, look at how he posted it, because the how is the entire story. Not on the main feed, where his hundreds of millions of followers would actually see it. Not a grid post with a caption hyping the album. No, no, no. He put it on the story. The 24-hour trash can. The place where posts go to die before breakfast. And the caption? No caption. He posted the artwork, wrote Los Angeles Confidential, and dropped 2 little smoke emojis. That is it. No song of the summer. No go get that. No my brother did his thing. Just 2 smoke emojis and a title, like a man paying a parking ticket. Like a man settling a debt with exact change and absolutely no tip. And the detail that sent me completely over the edge, he did not even post the album. He posted the single. His single. The one with his name on it. So after a week of silence, after a public plea from his most loyal media soldier, after the entire internet spent days clowning him for feeding off the loyalty of others, Drake's grand gesture of support was promoting the one song on the album that directly benefits Drake. Baby, you cannot write comedy this good. The man found a way to make an apology that was still somehow entirely about him. That is a talent. A dark, twisted, hilarious talent. And can we talk about who Drake has been giving his energy to lately, because this is the part that had Akademiks and half the industry side-eyeing. In the last couple of years, Drake has been handing out pop features like Halloween candy. Pop stars, crossover darlings, festival acts. But when it comes to actual rappers, actual hip-hop artists outside of his own projects, the vault has been locked tight. The Game is one of the only rappers who got an outside collaboration from him at all, which should have made it more special, not less. You are telling me the pop girls get full verses and full rollouts, but the man who torched his own city for you gets 2 words and 2 emojis? The math is not mateing, and everybody sees it. But to truly understand why the internet has absolutely zero sympathy for the Game right now, why the comment sections are throwing a parade instead of a vigil, you have to understand the history. Because baby, the Game is not standing in the rain wondering why nobody will hand him an umbrella. He is standing in the rain holding a box of matches, surrounded by the ashes of every bridge he ever burned, asking why the neighborhood is so flammable. And the receipts on this go back 20 years. Let's start at the very top. Dr. Dre. The man who discovered him, developed him, and put the full weight of aftermath behind his debut. Dr. Dre did not just co-sign the Game, he built the runway that let the Game take off. And how did that relationship end? Estranged. Silent. One of the greatest producer-artist pairings of the 2000s, reduced to nothing. Then you have 50 Cent, and this one still blows my mind, because people do not talk enough about what 50 Cent actually did for the Game. 50 Cent did not just executive produce the debut. He opened up his own personal vault. He gave the Game beats he had been saving for his own album. He gave him hooks he had written for himself. Records that 50 Cent could have kept and turned into his own hits, he handed over so that the Game's debut could be the best album it could possibly be. And no, nobody is saying 50 Cent wrote his raps. But those beats and those hooks? That was foundation. That was investment. And how did the Game repay him? With one of the most infamous feuds in rap history. G-Unit vs. Everybody, diss records, public humiliation, years of warfare. That is how he treats the people who invest in him the heaviest. And then there is Eminem. And this is the one that genuinely makes no sense, because Eminem never did anything to this man except show him love. Eminem gave him a feature on the debut, a real one, and then never said a single negative word about him, ever, in 20 years. And the Game still came at him, publicly, for years, dropping a whole diss record, for what? For attention. For clout. For a headline. Eminem was out here minding his entire business and the Game decided to make him a target because the name value was there. So when people ask why the culture is not crying for the Game right now, that is why. Because everybody remembers. Everybody has the list. Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, Eminem, and a trail of smaller bridges in between. This man has spent 2 decades learning absolutely nothing about loyalty except how to demand it from other people. And that is what makes this the Toronto superstar situation so poetic, so cinematic, so perfectly symmetrical that it feels scripted. The Game is now on the receiving end of the exact treatment he spent 20 years handing out. He invested everything, he expected the return, and he got pocket lint. He is feeling, right now, today, in real time, exactly what Dr. Dre felt, exactly what 50 Cent felt, exactly what every person who ever went out on a limb for him felt. And here is the part that should honestly be studied in a psychology class, he does not see it. Standing at that release party, microphone in hand, he was not connecting any dots. He was genuinely confused about why Kendrick Lamar will not pick up the phone. Genuinely hurt about why Black Sam will not pick up the phone. Listing his good deeds from years ago like a man reading his resume to a locked door. And I want to be fair for a second, because the rant itself was not fake. You could hear it in his voice. This was not content, this was a wound. The game really did do things for people in their early days, and he really does remember every single one of them, and it really does eat him alive that the gratitude has an expiration date. But y'all, gratitude always has an expiration date when your ledger is public. You cannot keep a running tab of favors and then act shocked when people would rather be broke than owe you. The streets have a saying, a favor you have to announce was never a favor, it was a loan. And the game has been announcing his favors for 20 years, at full volume, and now he is standing in the middle of his own celebration wondering why the room feels so empty. Meanwhile, look at what is happening on the other side of the chessboard, because the contrast could not be more violent. While the game was waving the flag and setting his own neighborhood on fire to prove his loyalty, Kendrick Lamar dropped GNX and kept the entire industry in a headlock without saying hardly anything at all. No rants. No release party speeches. No begging. Kendrick let the music do all the talking, and the music talked so loud that half the West Coast features on his own album allegedly wanted off the project once they heard where his allegiance really was. That is the part that has to hurt the most. Not the two-word hook. Not the two emojis. The fact that AZ Chick and Lefty Gunplay reportedly looked at this album, heard the smoke, and said absolutely not. His own Coast would not even stand next to him on a record, and the man he did it all for would not even stand next to him on a feed. Because let's be brutally honest about what the Compton veteran was really asking for with this album. He was not asking for a feature. He was asking for rescue. He wanted the Six Gods name to do for the documentary 3 what 50 Cent's hooks did for the documentary, provide the commercial engine so his voice could do the rest. That is the playbook that made him a star in 2005, and 20 years later he tried to run the exact same play with a new superstar. But 50 Cent gave him the whole playbook. Beats, hooks, structure, support, a whole machine. Aubrey gave him a catchphrase and a smoke emoji. One man built him a house. The other man mailed him a brick and expected a thank you card. And this man, to his credit or his delusion, depending on how you look at it, is still out here smiling with that one brick like it is a cornerstone. And I keep coming back to the release party rant, because the more I sit with it, the sadder it gets. Think about the math of that moment. This man is standing in a room full of cameras celebrating the documentary 3, and instead of talking about the album, he is talking about phone calls. Unanswered phone calls. From Kendrick. From Black Sam. He is publicly inventorying the good deeds he did for Nipsey Hussle's family and for Kendrick's early career, in front of strangers, on his biggest night. That is not anger, y'all. That is grief. That is a man who looked around at his own party and realized half the invitations he cared about never got answered. And instead of sitting with that privately, he broadcast it. And the internet, being the internet, did not respond with sympathy. The internet responded with a quote tweet festival, because everybody else can see the one thing he cannot: you do not get to spend 20 years treating loyalty like a weapon and then cry when it jams. And while all of this was unfolding, the internet did what the internet does best. It turned a man's professional humiliation into a festival. The memes came in waves, y'all. Somebody edited the hook so it was just the two words looping for 10 straight minutes and titled it the deluxe edition. Somebody else posted a picture of a single chicken nugget dipping sauce cup and captioned it the whole feature. The quote tweets were a battlefield, the reaction videos were multiplying by the hour, and the comment sections under every blog post covering this album turned into a full-blown civil war. On one side, you had the loyalists arguing that any touch from the man himself is a blessing, that the name in the credits alone is worth more than most rappers' entire rollout, and that the documentary rapper should be on his knees grateful for the 2 words he got. On the other side, you had the realists saying what I am saying: a cosign you have to beg for in public is not a cosign, it is a citation. And baby, the realists were winning by a landslide, because the evidence was sitting right there on a 24-hour timer. But let's zoom out for a second and talk about what is actually at stake here, because this is bigger than one album. The documentary is not just a title, it is a brand. The original debut is certified classic, one of the strongest first statements rap has ever produced, and it made he a household name on the strength of a machine that was fully behind him. The sequel kept the legacy respectable. This third chapter was supposed to be the coronation, the victory lap, the proof that 20 years later he could still command the culture's attention on his own terms. Instead, the entire conversation around the documentary 3 has become a conversation about the Toronto superstar. Not about the music. Not about the bars, the production, the West Coast sound he leaned into. About whether or not another man would post about it. That is the cruelest part of this entire saga. He built an entire rollout around borrowed star power, and when the star power flickered, there was nothing underneath holding the spotlight. The album became a referendum on a relationship instead of a body of work, and once that happens, the music never gets its fair hearing. And do not miss the industry-wide lesson hiding inside this comedy, because every young artist watching this should be taking frantic notes. One-way loyalty is the most expensive currency in this business, and it buys nothing. The Compton veteran is hardly the first rapper to learn this, he is just the latest and the loudest. This industry has a graveyard full of soldiers who waved flags for kingdoms that never learned their names, who defended men at their lowest and were strangers to them at their peak. The playbook never changes, the superstar accepts the loyalty, enjoys the defense, absorbs the labor, and when the invoice arrives, suddenly he is in Italy, suddenly he is on the PlayStation, suddenly the story post has to be crowdsourced through a live stream intervention. And while the timelines were busy making sauce jokes, the industry group chats were having a much colder conversation about what this means for everybody still standing in that circle. Now here is the part of this story that sent the entire industry into a full group chat meltdown, because once Akademiks put the battery in everybody's back, the conversation stopped being about one post and started being about the Six Gods' entire operation. Because if you actually look at the OVO roster right now, and I mean really look at it, the situation is dire. Party Next Door showed up on this man's album and, I am just going to say what everybody in the comments said, the vocals sounded like they were mixed inside a washing machine. Nobody checked the levels, nobody cleaned it up, they just shipped it. And that is supposed to be one of the flagship voices of the label. Then you have the rest of the roster, and no shade, but when was the last time any of them had a moment that did not require Aubrey's arm physically around their shoulder? The narrative floating around the industry right now, and Akademiks said a version of this out loud, is that the man himself might actually want to put in a bid and sign the documentary rapper for real, because as crazy as it sounds, at this exact moment, he would be the strongest soldier in that entire camp. Think about how insane that sentence is. The man getting fed breadcrumbs would immediately become the most valuable player on the roster that is feeding him breadcrumbs. And that, right there, is the tragedy at the center of this whole saga, because the Compton veteran genuinely believes he is one conversation away from the inner circle. He has been behaving like an OVO soldier without the chain, without the contract, without the protection, and most importantly, without the reciprocity. He is doing full-time work for part-time acknowledgement. He is out here fighting a war that he volunteered for, defending a man who could not be bothered to type 3 words about his album, absorbing damage to relationships that took decades to build, and his reward is a story post at 4 in the morning that expires by lunch. Baby, that is not an alliance, that is an internship. An unpaid internship at a company where the CEO does not know your name but loves your loyalty posts. And the wildest part of all of this? This man is not even the first person this has happened to. He is just the loudest. Look at the pattern over the last 2 years. The features going to pop stars while the rappers who defended him get silence. The loyalty tests that only run in one direction. The support that flows up the mountain but never flows back down. Akademiks hinted at it on the stream and the industry has been whispering it for months. The circle keeps shrinking, the keeps turning count keeps rising, and every time somebody finally says it out loud, the OVO faithful act like it came out of nowhere. It did not come out of nowhere. It came out of the same place it always comes from. A pattern, repeated, until even the loyalists start keeping receipts. Now, I do want to present the other side, because y'all know I am fair. There are people in the comments and in the culture saying the documentary rapper knew exactly what he was signing up for. That the Toronto superstar has operated like this for a decade and the information was publicly available. That a man with 20 years in this business should have known that a 2-word hook means a 2-word relationship. And honestly, there is truth in that. The voicemail from the Drillmatic era was a warning. The pop features were a warning. The silence during the war, where he was doing more defending than some people on the actual payroll, was a warning. All the data was on the table. But here is the thing about men like the Compton veteran, they do not read warnings, they read mirrors. He looked at the sixth god and saw 2005 again. A superstar, a debut-sized opportunity, a vault of momentum waiting to be shared. He did not realize that this time, he was not the artist being built. He was the wall being leaned on. So where does this go from here? Because baby, this is not over. Insiders are already saying this man is well aware of how this looks, and if there is one thing we know about this man after 20 years, it is that he processes embarrassment in the studio. Some people journal. The documentary rapper records. And with the way this rollout has gone, between the pulled features, the release party rant, the unanswered phone calls, the two-word hook, and the story post that barely beat the expiration clock, the next move out of his camp is going to be very, very interesting. Does he take the high road, smile for the cameras, and pretend that 2 words and 2 emojis were worth 2 years of loyalty? Or does he do what he has always done, what he did to 50 Cent, what he did to everyone who ever handed him less than he felt he was owed, and turn the whole thing into content? Because the irony would be absolutely cinematic, the same pattern that destroyed every relationship he ever had might be the only thing that saves this album's second week. And meanwhile, the other side of this chessboard has been dead silent, and that silence is loud. Kendrick Lamar has not said one word about any of this, and honestly, why would he? When your enemy's allies are doing this to each other in public, you do not interrupt, you take notes. Black Sam still has not picked up the phone. The West Coast features are still pulled. And he is standing in the exact middle of the bridge he set on fire, holding a story post like it is a peace treaty, and everybody can see the smoke except him. So now I need to hear from y'all, because the comments section is about to be a war zone and I am here for every second of it. Question number 1, was that feature disrespectful, or was it just smart business? Should the Compton veteran be grateful for the 2 words, because even 2 words from that man move numbers, or is a half-hearted cosign worse than no cosign at all? Question number 2, after everything we just laid out, the voicemail, the history, the pattern, did this man get played, or did he play himself? Be honest. And question number 3, and this is the one that is going to start real fights, if you are the documentary rapper right now, today, what is your next move? Do you keep waving the flag and hope the loyalty eventually gets repaid? Do you go back home and try to fix what is broken on your own coast, or do you pick up the pen and turn all of this into the record everybody is secretly waiting for? Personally, and y'all know I do not bite my tongue, I think we are about to see a very familiar movie with a brand new cast. I think that story post bought Aubrey about 2 weeks of peace, and I think the moment this album's numbers finalize, the tone is going to change. Because he has never, not once in 20 years, let disrespect sit quietly. He has responded to less than this from bigger names than this. And the second he decides that those 2 words and those 2 emojis were an insult instead of a favor, baby, the rollout for the response record is going to make this rollout look like a dress rehearsal. The only question is whether anybody is left in his corner to hear it. Because that is the real story underneath all the jokes and all the smoke emojis. Strip away the memes and the group chat comedy and what you have is a 20-year veteran who gave away his alliances, his neighborhood goodwill, and his dignity, piece by piece, in exchange for proximity to power, and the power would not even give him a feed post. There is a lesson in that for every artist watching, every up-and-comer taking notes, every soldier currently waving somebody else's flag. Loyalty that only flows in one direction is not loyalty, it is leakage. And eventually, the well runs dry. So make sure y'all hit that like button if you made it this far, share this video everywhere, because somebody in your circle needs to see these receipts laid out in order. Drop your take in the comments, and do not just pick a side, tell me why, because the why is where the real conversation lives. And stay locked in, because the other shoe has not dropped yet. The West Coast has been way too quiet about this whole situation, and when that silence breaks, and it will break, we are going to be right here breaking down every second of it. Until then, keep your eyes open, keep your receipts organized, and remember, in this industry, the sauce is never the meal. I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.